All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, all thing cycling podcast with your host, Sylvie. And I'm really excited to bring this amazing woman to the podcast. She was referred by one of the other ladies, and she has a really, really special story. So this is Haley Smith, and she's sitting in Vancouver or BC. Victoria. Ugh, even better. And here's her short bio. So she's a professional mountain bike rider for Norco factory team and the Canadian national team. As she went to Commonwealth Games bronze medalist. Congratulations, another podium for Canada, and have launched currently. She is training for the Olympics for Tokyo. Now, quick question. Do you think it's going to happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Very confident that it's going to happen.
That's good. We need to keep everybody like moving forward on our Olympics. I don't know if we can keep pushing them back. But she has a really special story. So she's going to talk about how she developed anorexia as a young teenager. And she's going to talk about how she got into cycling after, how it changed her life, keeping track of the anorexia. Because as you know, once it's happened, it's always kind of in the back of your mind. So she's going to tell us all about her story. She's very passionate about mental health and helping, I imagine, other girls through this as well. And, you know, if you find that in that realm, like right now as a listener, I encourage you to reach out to me, reach out to Haley, and there's always resources that we can refer you to. She aims to improve through talking and social literacy on these issues to increase the toolkit for young athletes. So I'm super excited to bring her here to talk about this issue. It's something that is in our sports, all sports. It's not widely talked about, and it can really hinder, athlete development and life moving forward. So thank you very much, Haley, for being here. We really appreciate you, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to be on. I feel this is quite a relevant topic personally, but also just in cycling as a whole. So it is, you're right, it's something that we need to talk more about and just increase awareness of, because it's something that kind of, it derails a lot of careers, it derails a lot of lives, and we have the opportunity to kind of change that by talking about it. So yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let's dive into it. Tell us how it all started. Well, because it was pre-cycling, let's talk about how you found yourself diagnosed with anorexia.
Yeah, so I'll give you the very abridged version. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that create the circumstance for an eating disorder to develop, and you can't really tease them all out. So I will do my best to be as concise as possible while giving you all the relevant details. So I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was in grade 9. So I was 13, turning 14. And it developed and progressed and worsened over the course of that grade 9 year. I think I probably have to back up a little bit and just tell you sort of the characteristics I had as a child, so you can understand why it developed. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was always very anxious. I was a perfectionist. I was really motivated by trying to be the best. I was really afraid of authority. I was just really like a nervous, anxious energy child. And I had very, very high expectations of myself. And I didn't really understand where all of this like anxious energy and need for control and need to like do something, air quote, worthwhile came from. But with, 15 years of hindsight, I can now realize that I was having an existential crisis that I'd been having since I was pretty much 8 years old. I can remember being as young as 8, and the first time that I sobbed myself to sleep because I'd realized that people die, and that was something that I never got over. I just had that. Every kid eventually has that realization. They go through the the realization and then the understanding of mortality. It's something that we all as humans have to go through.
Did
But
somebody die in your life at that time?
Yes, not someone close to me or super close to me, but
Right.
I was confronted with the concept. And
Oh,
like
okay.
I said, a lot of kids, like, they just don't, I really internalized it and I didn't get over it. I didn't have the maturity or the skills required to understand that information. And it kind of progressively became a bigger and bigger fear in my life. And
Oh,
by the
wow.
time I entered grade 9, I was so anxious about this that I was hardly sleeping like any night. And I was starting to exhibit all these different behaviors throughout the day that were sort of, oh, I'm so sorry, my alarm's going off. I started to exhibit all these behaviors throughout my daily life that were like an attempt to control this anxiety I felt about mortality and like the meaning of life and things that a kid just really, shouldn't be worrying about, but I was
Right.
obsessively worrying about. And anyways, in order to the perfectionism and the aggressive anxiety and the concern with being the best at everything, those were all sort of attempts to feel like I had control over my life and feel like my life had meaning. And then of course when you enter grade 9, that's quite a big life transition for most people. It's in Ontario, at least, it's a change to high school, a much bigger school. You're no longer the fastest kid in gym class because there's 400 extra kids in gym class. And my identity really was challenged when I entered grade 9. And up to that point, so much of my identity had been focused on academic performance and sport performance. And now all of a sudden I was facing more competition and more, not threats to my identity, but it wasn't something that I could, being the best wasn't something that I could still define myself by.
Right.
Anyways, my anxiety kind of spiraled and it became social, and then it became about like the physical aspects of, again, air quotes, perfection. So I started to aggressively exercise in an attempt to improve my sport performance in hockey and in other school sports. And I started to really restrict food. And at first it wasn't really like born of an eating disorder. It was born of this desire to improve physically, underlain by all the anxious motivation. Anyways, for that entire year of grade 9, it just progressively got worse and worse to the point where I stopped eating, essentially. And by the end of grade 9, I had, I don't like to use numbers too much because I think that can be triggering for a lot of people, but I had, I was never a very large person, and I had lost almost 30 pounds. I was extremely, extremely underweight. People are very reluctant to diagnose eating disorders because it's something that you can't necessarily see. Like, you can't see what's going on in someone's brain. So for a long time, I was going through endless medical tests thinking, okay, well, maybe it's lupus. Maybe it's some sort of other autoimmune disease. Like, there's got to be a physical reason why this girl is so outwardly ill. And it took a long time for my parents to be able to convince the medical system that, no, there is something wrong. This is a mental health issue. We have to get this sorted. And luckily enough, my pediatrician was on the same page. But at the time in Ontario, in order to secure a hospital bed, to have someone hospitalized, there had to be an immediate physical risk factor because there weren't enough beds. So I remember I was in grade 9 and it was summer, it was June, just before exams, and I got a call to go down to the principal's office, and they said, your mom's coming right now, she's picking you up, you have to go to the emergency department at the hospital, there's been some sort of development. And it was that my EKG data came back and my resting heart rate was 30 beats per minute, which maybe doesn't sound crazy to a lot of cyclists, but as a 13-year-old girl who's not an endurance athlete yet, that was extremely worrying. Anyways, I was admitted to the hospital. I wasn't a cyclist yet. I was extremely mentally unwell, and I spent a few months there.
Did you find that
as
all that time your performance was going down?
Oh yes, sorry. That was a very long monologue. I apologize.
But it's perfect. But because you were training so hard for performance improvement, I would imagine not eating would significantly
oh my
affect
gosh,
that.
yes, it was terrible. I started out the year as a starting lineup on our varsity hockey team. So I was the youngest kid on starting lineup, and I was so excited about it. And by the end of the year, I wasn't even playing. I had no energy. Like the coach had benched me because you could see that I had no energy. I vividly remember being at one high school soccer game, and someone passed me the ball, and it was a little cold outside, and people who are extremely underweight struggle more in the cold. And I remember watching the ball come to me, trying to make my foot move to get the ball, and not able to make my foot move, and I just watched the ball roll at like 1 kilometer an hour out of bounds. So for sport performance was not happening. I had no energy for that. It was like basic life functions only, even those were shutting down. Extreme exhaustion.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. So you ended up in the hospital?
Yeah, so I was hospitalized for 2 months. And I mean, I don't know how much detail everyone is aware of with eating disorders, but things like all your meals have to be supervised by nurses so that they know you're eating everything. Small little things like I was locked out of my bathroom because they were afraid of
vomiting,
other eating disorder behaviors like purging and such. Which actually, looking back now, I had a hilarious moment where, because I was locked out of the bathroom, the nurses were so busy so that my lunch was delayed. So my lunch had been sitting out for a while, and the lunch that day was potato salad. So my potato salad with all this mayonnaise had been sitting out all day. They finally fed me, and I had food poisoning because of the mayonnaise, and I was locked out of the bathroom. So lots of insult added to injury there, where that was a disaster.
Where's the nearest sink? Oh my god.
Oh, I didn't even have a sink. It was bad news bears, but little things like that I can look back on and laugh at now. But anyways, yes, I was hospitalized, had to see a dietitian, psychiatrist, family psychiatrist, psychologist, the whole works. And then when I was released from the hospital, that's when I found my bike. And my dad and my brother had been mountain biking for a bit, and they were doing things like the 24-hour events in Ontario, the relay races. Yeah. And when I was released, I bought my first bike. My parents paid for half and I paid for half. And I started mountain biking. And that's kind of where I found my purpose and my niche. And it allowed me to finally learn to manage these like underlying anxiety issues I had. And instead of, severely restricting food or other restrictive habits, like, my obsession with sleep and minimizing social situations. Anyways, this cycling gave me a positive outlet to work through my anxieties instead of having these.
So how is it different from the other sports that you were in? Because you said you had like soccer and hockey.
I think
how did cycling be? How is it different? Just because you're not within a team environment?
Well, no, because I still really enjoyed to ride with other people and be in those, like, the social elements of a team. But I think there's a few things. One, you're in nature, especially with mountain biking. So that was huge because there's a lot of research that shows how grounding being in the woods is. And I don't know if I could explain it in a concise way, but there is something about being in nature, and that was at the top of the list.
Right.
Cycling is also a very meditative activity. It's like, it's been called meditation in motion, and it's true. It allows for you to become present and to kind of, we all have experienced this, where you ride and eventually your brain shuts off. And it's just like,
I like that, meditation in motion.
Yeah,
I've never heard that.
That was a big piece of it, is that I just learned to be with my bike, and to the noise in my head would quiet for a little bit.
Right.
That was different than other sports. It turned the analytical side off.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the other piece is that I didn't compete right away, and I had never done a sport without competing in my life. Everything I'd ever done was competing. Which
That must have been nice.
Yeah, I mean, I loved organized sports, but I had never just done a sport
Just
other
to
than
do
recess for fun.
Yeah.
So that was a big piece. And I eventually obviously did start racing because that's what I do now. But at first it was just me trying to figure out the trail, trying to improve, come home with a few less bruises. And yeah, it was very therapeutic that way.
So how old were you when you got on the bike, and dare I ask, how old are you now, and how long, or yes, maybe how many years have you been in mountain biking?
So that was in 2008. Yes, 2008. It's now 2021. And
oh my gosh, you're so young.
So I think I was 14 or 15 when I started to ride. And it became in earnest quite quickly. Like I really latched onto it. But now I'm 27. So I've been.
Oh, I thought 27. I thought you're 21 now. I'm like, gosh, you're so.
Oh no, sorry, no.
I'm like, geez, you've
now.
done a lot.
So it's been 12 years maybe, and I just got progressively more into cycling, and it became more and more of my life, and now it's what I do.
So okay, so you started in Ontario.
Yes. Yeah, I only
like in Toronto, like close to Hardwood
north of
Hills.
Toronto so north of Toronto, but not on the other side of Lake Simcoe. So in a town called Uxbridge, at Durham Forest, who people from
I've heard of Durham Forest.
Quite often ride there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I grew up, and that has been my home base for my whole life. My parents have lived just in the one house since we were born. And I mean, we've been coming out to Victoria every winter for 7 years to train. And this year, because of COVID, we decided that we would make it more stable. So we actually live here now. We moved.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that must be nice. Missing the snow?
Is, yes. Missing the snow. We suffer for it a lot of days with, like 4 degrees pouring rain. But so far in January, it's been gorgeous.
Yeah, we just got a big dumping of snow, and we're like super. I don't know if you're a downhill skier as well, but no.
No.
I'm like, yeah. Well, I sit on my trainers. Yeah, I got all that's my tandem bike. Well, I'm trained to be a pilot for one race. Yeah, and anyway, so there's my bike. My bike's over there. I got trainers over here, and anyway, so this is my little mecca inside where. We get outside and do all sorts of stuff. But so how do you find like now moving forward in once you started getting competitive, like you finished school and then you started onto the national team? How did you progress onto the national team, and how did you manage, the fact that you had gone through anorexia and now being an elite athlete, like you really do have to manage your fuel intake.
Yeah. I think if I'm being really honest, I think probably my history held me back for a little while. You can't just shake the restrictive habits and the restrictive thought patterns. They're kind of there, and they're always waiting for you to be at your weakest so they can come out again.
Right.
But I mean, I'll start with just my progression through cycling. So with the OCA, there's with the support of the OCA, and then kind of the very logical progression of events, there's a pathway to the national team. So you go to an O Cup and you do well, and then the provincial team takes you to a Canada Cup and you do well, and then you go to nationals, and if you do well, then you're invited to World Cups and World Championships. And that's what happened my second year as a junior. I decided that I wanted to go to national championships for the first time, and I placed second, so I was invited to World Champs that year, which was the year that Catherine Pendrell actually won her first world title. So seeing that event was kind of like the fire stoker for me. But anyway, so that's kind of, it was a very natural progression. Like I just went from slightly bigger event every time until I was at the world level. And yeah, I mean, at first I was still so not restrictive, but like aware of my food intake that I think it probably it impaired my quality of life for sure. But because I was under observation by such a large medical team, it didn't derail me physically. So for those first few years of cycling, I was having to go for like blinded weigh-ins with my doctor, and if the weight dropped and they were like, well, sorry, cycling's gone, but it never got to that point because I knew that was the threat.
Really.
The threat hovering over me. Anyway, so I was under observation, so I had to stay like up on my fueling. And then as I went to university, I found myself sort of relaxing into a maybe a bit of a different person. Like I was relaxing into being in social situations and enjoying things a little bit more. So I became naturally a little less restrictive in all areas of my life. But there have been periods throughout my cycling career where I've been, for example, really tired or really stressed about an upcoming race. And I find myself falling into those like maladaptive but comfortable ways of managing my anxiety and restricting my intake, or, you know, doing too much training because it's just what my habitual response to stress is. Yeah, so there have been periods of time where it's set me back, for sure. But I think also because I had to confront this before cycling, I've been very aware that this is a risk factor.
Right.
And
of course.
So, yeah, so other athletes that maybe develop an eating disorder through an endurance sport, I've always been aware that it's there. So I'm more, maybe more aware of like how it can happen and how to avoid it.
And how to control it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like I was mentioning, I'm going to have someone on here who's a guy, and he developed it while he was during, and it's quite an interesting little story that we kind of got off topic onto while we're talking about his coaching. And it was, you know, the fact to be lighter and faster and you know, that whole stigma about, you know, like your power to weight ratio and all that. So I found that really interesting. And, you know, yours is a different story because you started at the front, you got all the help you needed to now move forward as an elite pro athlete and I guess all the tools to you know, manage it. And I just think back I had a bit of a story, not as long as yours, and I was just thinking, because I went through a little bout of, I purged, and I remember thinking, I'm like, why did I even start that? Because I was in cross country running and I did all the sports. I did track, I did cross country, I did field hockey, volleyball, like I was in everything. And there was just this one little period of time where I needed to, I don't know what triggered it, but I would eat supper, I would purge, and then I would go for a long trail run. And I did that a lot, and then I stopped. And it was just a really weird, I can't even pinpoint like what triggered it. But talking to you, I'm just like, yeah, maybe do all girls go through this? Were you alone, or did you?
I didn't. I mean, this is something, the reason I started talking publicly about this is I speak to a lot of school groups about this and students. But the reason I started talking about it is because no one talks about it. And I didn't know, of course there were other kids experiencing eating disorders when I was in high school. There's no way, statistically speaking, guaranteed I would have known people going through it. But I didn't know anyone going through it because nobody talked about it. So I had no idea how to navigate it. I had no close role models to like help me navigate it. And that needs to change. it just needs
Well,
to
it's
change.
great that you're an advocate for it and that you're open to going to schools, because I think it's so important. It's probably even more prevalent now with social media
Yeah.
than anything, you know,
Mhm.
back in the day. Like, you know, I think yours early 2000s, right?
Yeah. I'm
When it
so
all
glad
started.
that I didn't have social media when
Yeah,
it was
really. Eh?
happening. I really, really feel bad for the kids that are growing up with it.
Yeah.
Impossible to navigate. We need to figure out better ways to teach kids how to use social media. And anyways, that's a whole sidebar.
Yeah,
But
that's seriously, that's a whole another topic. But
yeah,
so now you're training, you're in Victoria, and how does it feel to be, you know, moving forward to Tokyo?
yeah. I mean,
Excited?
I'm so excited. And to be honest, it's been probably 18 months since I've been able to say that I'm excited. Um, I had like
Oh,
in
first,
2019,
how did you feel when they canceled it last year?
pretty numb. I was already in a place where I was like I was in a real rut mentally.
Oh,
Um, so they canceled it and I just didn't really have a response to it. And I was like, I, I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know what to do. So of course, being me, I turned to my maladaptive coping mechanisms and I started to train really hard and to restrict my food intake. Um, so, anyways, long story short, the pandemic and the brief cancellation of Tokyo last year and the postponement, um, that I relapsed last year. Um,
right.
so that really impaired my mental state and my emotional state and my physical performance for kind of like the last 12 months. And it's only really
Mhm.
been in the last, I mean, in October, my support team and my family and friends kind of basically said, well, Haley, there's something wrong. This is not good. There's something happening. And
Yeah,
there was kind of an intervention. And it's only really been in the last like 8 weeks that I've seen my energy return, and
wow.
my training numbers are now back on,
Mhm.
to improving instead of just like being medium
Right.
and not going
Yeah.
anywhere. So anyways, I didn't handle that very well, I suppose.
Because it, you know, like I'm sure that you're one of many athletes, you know, that are all excited. Then, you know, then the next day it's like, oh my God, like I'm just so ready to peak for this performance. And now, what am I going to do for another year? Like, do I navigate this switch up in, you know, event dates? Like that's huge for athletes. You know what I mean? Because, oh,
Yeah.
putting
And
together programs is just like, okay,
mhm.
now what do we do?
And I think a lot of athletes too were confronted with the question of like, why am I doing this? Like, who am
Ooh,
I and why do I do this?
right.
And that was something I kind of struggled with too. I was like,
Hmm.
I lost seeing, and I'm sure many people in many
Right.
areas have been confronted with that through the
Yeah.
pandemic. And I really struggled with that. And I kind of just lost all my zest and lost all my fire. And that's
Right.
one thing that people talk about now, maybe the physical side effects of eating disorders and
Hmm.
REDS, but there's a lot like more insidious stuff. Like apathy is really common with low energy. Just like really depressed basic affect levels. So kind of
Yeah.
like a lowering of your baseline emotional state.
Right.
And for me, that was very true. Like I was just kind of like eh, about everything, and
Oh,
it makes life kind of suck. It makes your training
hmm.
suck. It's really those are the side effects that I find most harmful because we don't really necessarily pay attention to them.
Right.
We don't give them the same. It's not something you can see. Like you can't
Hmm.
see when it's a weight number or anything like that. You can look at it and say, yeah, that's probably an indicator. Or,
Right.
the absence of your cycle. You can be like, yeah, that's probably an indicator.
Oh, yeah.
But if it's like, maybe she's just a little sad, like that's really hard to say, no, there's something happening there. She's under
Right.
fueled.
Yeah.
And for
Or
me,
she's
that's
been
like a
sad for like 6 months. I think it's This is a little excessive now.
Yeah, and that's a big indicator for me. Like if my emotion goes, hands down, there's I know that something's off there.
So what kind of things have you put in place to keep yourself, like your emotions and your feelings and your positivity, like always moving forward? What have you put into place, like knowing what you know now from your past? What things do you do now to keep yourself, like meditating, journaling? Have you
Yeah,
incorporated
there's lots
all
of
that fun
different
stuff?
there's lots of different like actual actions I take. So I meet with a sports psychologist, and I have an ongoing relationship with her. I do either meditation or like a mindfulness activity daily. So that has helped kind of retrain my brain. A real focus on sounds trite almost because it's become cliche, but a real focus on process and little improvements that are only in relation to myself, not in relation to other people or competition. So that's a big one. But honestly, my coach has always, first I have to say this, that I'm extremely lucky to have a coach that has never, ever, ever told me to lose weight or to focus on that half of the equation. He's always like, well, do you think you're at the most watts you're ever going to be able to push? No. Okay, well then let's work on the watts half of the equation. So he's very supportive and positive that way. Anyways, so having, I've lost my train of thought.
Well, your positive, your daily actions.
Yeah, so like daily actions, like the meditating and the mindfulness practice. I truly have lost my train of thought. That doesn't happen very often.
That's okay. It happens to me as you get older. It happens.
Yeah, clearly.
So here, I'm going to ask you a question then while you're trying to get back there. I noticed you're married.
Yes. Yeah.
How does your husband play in here? Because I'm sure he knows a little bit of the history. And does he get cues from you, like when, okay, like if you know something, then this is your cue to kind of step in and remove me from the situation or go do something different? Or how does he?
He's also a professional cyclist for the same team as me. So we spend all day, every day together. We train together. So he's very in tune with all of this, and he knows my complete history. So he's really key. He keeps my focus not on my body or on my food. Like the answer for me is to not think about it. So he helps me keep that as not a focus. But he's just really good at drawing out or drawing my attention to the highlights and pointing out what I'm doing well and all those kinds of things. So he's really good at manipulating my focus in a positive way. And you did remind me what my train of thought was. And I was going to say that my coach always says that your brain follows your body. So I've always, when I'm too tired to do a workout, or when I break down in tears in an interval set and I'm like, I'm not good enough, or why am I not tough enough to do this? And Dan will say, well, Haley, it's not
I was going to ask if it was enough. Dan.
Yeah, coach. It is Dan. So he's like, it's not that you're not tough enough. You're the toughest person I know. If you can't do it, it's because you're too tired. And if you're too tired, it's because we're either training too much, you're not recovering well. And if you're not recovering well, that's probably because you're not fueled well enough.
And sleeping and that.
Yeah. So, and for me, the biggest piece is always the fuel. So the first thing is in getting back to a place right now where I'm on a positive trend has just been increasing my carbohydrate intake. So
do you ever track your own food? Did you ever get into that? No, because that can become obsessive as well.
Oh, it's a huge obsessive risk for me. So like I maybe weigh myself like 3 times a year. Like I don't ever know what
I thought you were gonna say 3 times a day. I'm like,
oh my God, no. Like
3 times a year
behavior. For anyone who's restrictive in this way, that is a huge thing. It's a risk. So I don't do it. I know that I'm probably in the ballpark most of the time. It doesn't really impact me, so I just don't do it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of food tracking, that's another like obsessive risk for me. So the only time I've ever done it is with the dietitian that I've been working with for like 8 years now, and I don't actually track it. I just take a picture of my meal and I send it to her, and it would only be for like 2 days at a time. She'll be like, okay, this happens maybe once every 2 years. We do a check-in to make sure I'm still fueling adequately. And
wow, every 2 years?
Like really infrequently, and only when there's like an issue happening, or when I'm worried that there might be an issue happening.
Right.
So yeah, that's the most food tracking I've ever done, is sent like pictures of 6 meals to my dietitian, and she'll kind of like analyze it and tell me, okay, you need to eat more, or yep, this is good.
That's kind of really far apart, don't you find?
It's really far apart.
Yeah.
Like the intervals of tracking, or
yeah.
Well, and if we're looking, I mean, this is something that I've had to become very good at from a young age. Like when I was 13, I had to get my fueling under control, or I was not going to be allowed out of the hospital. So I've been very aware of it for a very long time, and the answer for me is to draw less attention to it. So the only times we've ever done food tracking is to make sure that I'm, like, for example, I did it the first time we did it. I think I was not getting a cycle, and we were like, okay, let's figure out what's happening.
Right.
And it turned out that it was likely stress, because we did a whole bunch of tests and my energy balance was good. And then most recently, I was doing it last year, while we were taking the year of Olympic-lessness to try to see, to experiment basically. And at first my restrictive and obsessive training habits last year were because I directed my anxious energy and motivation into that. I was like, well, this is an opportunity to get way better, so let's just practice everything. And so we did some food tracking last year, and to see if that's a piece of the puzzle that I needed to work on. And the answer was, no, this makes her spiral. So.
Right. Okay. I know, I can see that. I was just surprised that every 2 years is like a check-in. I thought like every 6 months or something like that.
And I just threw out every 2 years as probably an exaggeration, just to illustrate that it's very, very infrequent, and I've hardly ever done it.
Yeah. Do you add supplementation in with your, like, to supplement outside of whole foods?
No, I take vitamin D, and that's it.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I do believe you can get everything you need in a balanced diet. I have a recovery mix that I'll return to if, for example, I'm at a World Cup venue and they can't get back to the house after training quickly enough, and I'll have recovery mix. But that's it. Oh,
okay. Yeah, because I talked to a lot of athletes, and they, in order to get more calories in or more, food on the fly, they've, gone to supplementation, just, pre-made shake meals or protein shakes, just to get extra protein in for recovery. So I was just wondering if that was part of your eating regime.
No. That was one of the things they made me do in the hospital, was I had to have these like hospital brand Ensures every day.
Ugh.
And
things are the worst. I don't even know how, like, they're lucky that they were the first thing on the market, Boost and Ensure, because they're still in the hospitals, and they're like the worst product ever. Toxic. Anyways.
So I don't do supplements. I also because you can't guarantee that they're safe. Like,
well, that's I get that, because I'm sure you're drug tested every once in a while.
Yes,
to make sure.
And also, I don't want to, like, even if I weren't being tested, I don't want to risk it. Like, I don't want to put substances in my body that I don't know I'm putting in my body. So
yeah, no, I can see that as a high level athlete. There is that big risk. Now, moving forward, you're all excited. I took you off the tangent of being all excited about Tokyo. Now we're all excited about Tokyo. You've got a big goal ahead. And how you feeling about that?
I feel much better than I felt in a long time. I feel very balanced. I know that the Olympics are not what will define me as an athlete, and
Mm-hmm.
I think because I relapsed last year and I hit that real low with like my mental health, it just reminded me that I do this because I love it, and I do this because I stand to have an impact on other young kids or young adults dealing with similar things. And I'm very fired up about that part
Oh,
of my mission.
right.
So I'm super excited for Tokyo because it will be like the most amazing life experience. But at the same time, I'm like, well, yeah, I also have World Cup goals and World Championships goals, and I have like social impact goals and
Oh,
community
let's talk
goals.
about those.
Well, I mean, you kind of listed them at the beginning there, is that like my mission is to
Oh, okay.
use sport to improve our
Mm-hmm.
societal conversations and literacy around these issues, and to help give kids the tools they need so that they don't end up in the hospital on bed rest, locked out of their bathroom for 2 months, so that it doesn't get to that point for kids. So that's kind of my mission in cycling, and what I hope to use this influence for. But also, I mean, also last year, that low just taught me that I actually do like to ride my bike just to ride it. Like I love it.
Mm.
And so that's getting me really excited right now, and just super fired up on what I get to do every day. So yeah, I have big goals for Tokyo. I mean, there's no guarantee yet that I'll be there, but I'm very hopeful and I'm very optimistic about it. And yeah, and just I'm excited for everything that's to come right now. And that's because I'm fueled well enough. I have the room and the capacity and the space to hold
You're
those
happy.
happy
Your
emotions.
mood is good. Your
Yeah, yeah.
oh, it all plays a big role. So now, do you have a plan? Is this your first Olympics?
It will be, yeah.
Oh, see, like, no wonder you're totally fired up.
Yeah.
Jeez, you'd be like Catherine. Well, I've been to 4, and like,
I think
she's
Olympians go through like they're fired up. They go to their second one. They're like, I know what this is all about. I'm too cool for this. And then probably when you hit your third Olympics, you're like, no, this is amazing. This only happens a few times. So
yeah.
I hope
So
I
do
get
you
that.
have a plan? So you got your plan going. You're training. You're on track. Like 2021 is going to be awesome, and I'm so glad because like we all need to embrace that that mood and that positivity around this year compared to last year. Do you have like a plan for afterwards?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I
Is
said,
that
the
like your
Olympics,
whole social, like going to talk at schools?
well, yeah, like the sport, sport is just one piece of who I am. And it took me a long time to realize that. And the Olympics are only one small piece of who I'll be. So that's not going to define me or define my whole career. I, I'll keep racing for, hopefully like another decade, maybe. I think I'll always be a cyclist. I'll always be an outdoor activity person. But I plan on going back to school
Oh, okay.
eventually. I don't know exactly for what yet, but I would love to work in the in the sport and mental health space. So we'll see where that
Mm.
takes me. But yeah, I have a university degree, so I'll just build on that, I think, and yeah, build on. I am doing a lot of public speaking right now and mentorship stuff with other kids. So build on that and tie it into who knows what yet. But
Oh, awesome. So people can book you for public speaking.
yes, it's a little
Okay.
more challenging right now given that we're all socially distanced. But I've done
But
quite a bit of stuff on
do you
Zoom.
have a link for that or a website or
I do have a
we'll have
website.
to add that?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's just HaleyHunterSmith.com.
Okay.
And there's a contact form on there.
Haley Hunter.
Yes, that's my middle name. There are a lot of Haley Smiths in the world, so that's I use my middle name for professional purposes so that yeah.
Okay. Good to know. So I'll add that. And, I'm sure a lot of schools can Zoom you in to classes these days.
Yeah.
And I think it's a super important topic that you're you're talking about. And I'm going to pass your name on to a couple teachers here in Ottawa.
Thank
I don't
you.
know what they're up to. Like, I know that they're just dealing with, open school, closed school, open,
Yeah.
so, but this might be something that could definitely be added, especially now, like with kids being at home. And, I think it's important for parents to be super vigilant on their kids, especially now since everybody's at home and locked in rooms and things like that. But, well, with that, this has been great. I had no idea what to expect, but your story is awesome. And I'm not going to say glad you started in high school, but like being at a teenager when it started is, I think you have such a powerful story to bring forward. And
Thank you.
And good luck at Tokyo. Gosh, I know some athletes here in Ottawa who were selected and then, it was all canceled. And but hey, here's a question. So since you're on the Canadian team, do you guys, does all the Canadian cyclists ever get together, and meet each other, like BMX, mountain bike, track, road, or is everybody kind of just sort of?
We're pretty siloed into our different disciplines.
Okay.
But we do, I was a member of the Athletes Council for the last 2 years, so I had the opportunity to meet more of the other disciplines. But yeah, we're pretty, it's such a huge sport with so many different disciplines that we don't ever really all get together. But we do have, in regular times, we would have mountain bike camps and there would be road camps and track camps, and sometimes there'd be opportunity to cross over, but very rarely.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's kind of unfortunate.
It is, yeah. But I mean, that's part of the byproduct of living in a country that's,
huge. Yeah.
6,000 kilometers wide.
Right, I guess so.
It's not really feasible for us.
I guess all the mountain bikers are either in Quebec at St. Anne's and Victoria.
Yeah, very spread out.
Yeah. And then tracks all in Toronto and Burnaby. But I was always wondering that. Does anybody ever just meet together?
Pretty rarely.
Yeah. Silo. I like that word.
The more friends you get in different disciplines, and you have the opportunity to ride with them. But.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, we'll bring it to a close. Thank you again, Haley. This has been exceptional. I can't wait to get this out to our listeners. And I just want to thank you as a guest. And I want to thank all of our listeners for taking in this episode. And don't forget to put on the notifications and subscribe to the podcast as well as to my YouTube channel so you can see us live. Just interact on that personal stage. And don't forget to give us a nice little 5-star review on Apple Podcast or iTunes, however you look at it, and as well as a review. And if you happen to know anybody who's in the cycling space who's doing extraordinary things, please send them to me. I would love to have them on the podcast. And with that, we'll see you on another episode. Thank you. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you again. And before you take off, I have a couple quick announcements, cycling related, of course. So I have my online bike maintenance webinar, though you'll learn how to change your tires, repair broken chains, adjust your brakes, and learn how to use all the tools that are in your bike bag that you should be carrying with you. Go to bmcwebinar.com. The next one is my 4-hour cycling skills intensive course. Now, this is where you're going to get all the cycling skills you need to take your experience to the next level, whether it's on the road or online. You're going to learn proper bike pedal form that's going to help you with your efficiency. You're going to learn how to climb hills, all the skills, tips, and tricks, and speed and power. Not to mention, we're going to finish off with nutrition that ties everything together. So go to cyclingskillspro.com and you can find all those information on my courses, webinars, and downloads there. Take care and have an amazing day. And remember, you're only one pedal stroke away from cycling like a pro.